few weeks ago, I deloaded and I lost muscle. Even 4 weeks past the deload, there are exercises that I haven't got my strength back on. In this video, I'll go over what I did wrong and how I'm going to structure my next deload, so you may learn from my mistakes and get some ideas on how to structure a deload. Before I go into how I deloaded, I have to explain the theoretical concept of productive overreaching. If you don't know it, it's a concept that you will eventually learn later in your fitness journey and crucial to know to understand my deload plan. Before you overtrain and start losing muscle, you enter the stage of being overreached. You're so fatigued that you can't build muscle, but not so fatigued that you've started losing it. People intentionally do too much to the point where another week of the same training will result in muscle loss, or at least another week of non-productive training, and then lower volume so they can recover from the fatigue and build muscle from the high amount of stimulus that is present in their body during the easy or deload week that wouldn't normally build them any muscle. They go over their limit, but not to the point of muscle loss, aka overtraining, and then they give their body the rest it needs to recover from it and build muscle in the process. It's theorized that by using that technique, you reach an amount of stimulus that isn't possible to reach with sustainable training, and the only way to progress at a certain point where such high stimulus is the only thing that makes you grow. I'm not a big believer in this technique, and especially not after my last deload. I had been doing high volume and intensity for a while, and I started to underperform. I had been underperforming in some muscle groups for a while, so I might already have started to overtrain in those areas. While I was PRing in some areas, many were underperforming, and I was starting to feel unmotivated, especially at the end of my workouts. I've been interested in the usefulness of carbs for natural bodybuilders for a while because I feel a lot better on low carb or keto. I wanted to test the effectiveness of carbs for recovery, so I added them back into my diet once I started to underperform to see if it would bring me back to the recovery hole that I had dug myself into. After 2 additional weeks of losing strength with carbs added back into my diet, I lost my faith in them and decided to deload. Because I had been doing so much volume, I thought I could just do a little bit on my deload because of the overreaching effect. And I thought my body needed the extra rest after all the abuse that it had gone through, but I was wrong. To keep the practice and technique on my lifts with the least amount of stress on my body, I decided to do the same amount of volume with 50% of the weight. I put all my lifts from a 6-day plan onto 2 days, and I was essentially just going in and doing warm-ups. But when I finished my deload week, I had lost even more strength than my already poor performance of many of my lifts. From that experience, I find it highly unlikely that the amount of stimulus present in your body during the deload week that was accumulated from previous weeks of high stimulus is of an amount that makes overreaching a useful strategy, and especially not for advanced lifters as the next step from traditional training. I've also learned that the amount of stimulus required for advanced lifters to maintain muscle mass is much higher than I previously thought, both from losing muscle on my deload week and from losing muscle from incorrect estimations of my maintenance volume in a couple of muscle groups in the past 4 weeks. 1/6 of your normal training volume is a recommendation that has been floating around the fitness space as a reasonable recommendation for the minimum amount of volume to maintain. Me and other advanced naturals in the industry like GVS have not found that to be the case. I, for example, was doing 3 sets 3 times a week to grow my abs, which is 9 sets total. 1/6 of 9 is 1.5, so around 2 sets per week should be sufficient to maintain my abs. But I have consistently been losing strength now for 4 weeks doing 2 sets 2 times a week, both for my abs and my calves, which I use the same amount of volume and frequency to grow and the same amount of estimated volume to maintain. Spending as much time as you can with a sustainably high amount of stimulus is something that I shoot for and recommend, but you shouldn't be afraid of overtraining and doing too much. If you never experience overtraining or doing too much, you can never really know what your limits are. Deloads can serve as useful tools to lower fatigue if you accidentally do too much, but you shouldn't be aiming to do such high volumes that you will eventually need them, unless you are deliberately testing your limits. If I'm feeling burnt out or need a deload in the future, I will drop to my maintenance volume for each body part. Every body part differs in volume needs based on its advancement and size, which is anywhere from 0 to 6 sets a week to failure and beyond for me. If I'm doing more than 2 times a week frequency, let's say 4 times a week frequency, on my deload I drop it to 2 times a week frequency. And if certain joints are feeling achy, I'll potentially move to a higher rep range in some movements that aggravate that area. If you don't know your maintenance volumes, you can follow this chart I made. It's on the side of more instead of less to reduce the likelihood of muscle loss during your deload and make sure that you aren't in a deficit during your deloads. If you're cutting, bump your calories up to maintenance. And if you're bulking, you should drop your surplus if it's high to a lower surplus or just to maintenance. Thank you for watching to the very end. I admire your curiosity for lifting and I hope I see you in the next one. Peace.